So my bent is basically, I'm not trying to determine. So you'll see a lot of people take this on and they'll provide their opinion. And of course there's opinion there, but they'll really go the nth degree to say, I thought this was the best team. I'm not doing that. I'm basically laying out what were the records, what were the results. And for as much as I don't like shared championships, the way college football conducted itself throughout most of its history, there should be a lot more shared championships than there are.
Yes.
But if, for example, I think I can speak for you, but I won't here. I'll set you up here, Matt. Like you, if I'm sitting there in I'll just pick a year, 1991, Washington, Miami, 1997, Michigan, Nebraska. Well, I think the rightful thing to do is to split the national championship, to share it. You got two major teams undefeated, both played significant schedules in major conferences. That's the only fair thing to do. Do I have an opinion about who was better? Sure, but I don't think my opinion should rule the national championship. Therefore, there should be a shared national championship. But if you're sitting there in 1991 and you're an AP voter, you had to put somebody at number one, you had to put somebody at number two. And so I don't fault the AP or the coaches poll because they had to make a decision. But what was fair is to divide the national championship. So my results, man, as I go through the years, actually result in a lot more shared national championships.
Yeah, I mean, certainly looking at the older years of college football history in the earlier part, the AP poll began, I believe, in 1936.
Yes.
So, what about before then? Like you had you didn't have regulated schedules. One team would play 10 games, another would play 8, another would play 6. And you would have a number of teams that were either unbeaten or unbeaten with one tie, some cases unbeaten with 2 ties. And how do you litigate those various disputes? Like there's a lot to sift through. Like, college football has a history now that is more than 150 years old. And so from the first 70 years of that history, so 1869 through 1939, you have a lot of messy disputes, and it's definitely worth going through that. And just as a personal matter, I didn't litigate national championship disputes when I wrote at College Football News. That's under Pete Fiutak, Rich Sermonello. I wrote there from 2001 through 2013. But what I did do, and it's no longer on the internet, like when the CFN's old site went bye-bye, and with that, I lost those links. But I did do a historical look at conference championships. And it's fascinating to see how those have been litigated and officially awarded through the decades. And I've just found so many fascinating situations in which a team with like 1 loss and 2 ties in the conference, would either get the title over a team with 2 losses and no ties, something like that. I mean, there's just a lot of very uneven situations that deserve a second look from college football historians.
We don't get to a point of regularity across the board, and it's still not a format that really determined national championships. But it took until like the 50s to get to a point where there was some regularity and normalcy in terms of you could look at one team and look at another team and say that their schedules are generally equitable across the board. But before that, my goodness, they're all over the place in regards to strength of schedule, for one thing, and legitimacy of the results, and the whole thing is just a mess. So it's very difficult to sort through. But to your point about 1978, it's just lunacy to me that anyone would vote Alabama the national champion when there was a 10-point game played in Birmingham between the two teams. Just crazy.
Yeah, like it wasn't even a neutral site game. And of course, we remember the 2008 Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech 3-way Big 12 South tiebreaker. And what should have made that so clear in favor of Texas. And hey, I love my Oklahoma Sooners fans. My next door neighbor growing up in Phoenix was from Oklahoma. So I rooted for Oklahoma against Nebraska in those Tom Osborne, Barry Switzer days. But if you're just litigating that 2008 3-way tie, Texas won on the neutral field. Texas Tech beat Texas at home. Oklahoma beat Texas Tech at home. Like that right there. Like if you have any doubt about how that three-way tie should have been litigated, it should have gone to Texas, because Texas achieved the hardest and best win not on its home field. So, it's just making some obvious distinctions such as those that needs to enter into the discussion. And one more note about the 78 USC Alabama game. Yes, it was a 10-point game, 24-14. It wasn't even that close. It was a 17-point game. Alabama got a late garbage touchdown. The dominance that USC displayed that day was far greater than 10 or even 17 points. It was a thrashing.
I will argue that the BCS was a bad system for two spots. I think it screwed it up a number of times. We could go to a number of years in which the wrong teams were selected. Had that been extended to a 4-team playoff using the BCS system, we would have been in much better shape.
No question. I mean, just think of all the seasons in which a USC Pete Carroll team would have been able to be as part of a 4-team group, having its chance to play for the national championship. I mean, that's one of the great regrets of USC football history, that a 4-team BCS or a 4-team playoff, however you want to label it, whatever label you want to put on the soup can, it didn't come until after the Pete Carroll era had ended.
One more point to this, then we'll come back to the here and now with USC Football Talk, everyone. And please leave your comments and questions there in the live chat, and we will get to them concerning the Trojans. But, and this is just personal opinion, but I think it's logical that while we had a point in time in which college football was polling its media members prior to postseason play, prior to the bowl games and crowning national championships, which is completely inane. I don't take it to the other end of the spectrum. A lot of fans and media people treat those bowl games in retrospect as like they're playoff games. So, for example, if you had an 11-0 team, let's say, over here, win a Big Ten or a Pac-10 or 8 at the time, and lose the Rose Bowl respectably in a respectable game, but you had another team over here disconnected that won the Big 8, let's say at 10-1, then won its bowl game, the bowl games were treated or are treated by a lot of people as like they're playoff games. Like you can't lose a bowl game and possibly share a national championship, where I view it just as another game against a strong opponent. So if your overall resume is comparable to the other teams you're being considered against, just because you lost a bowl game, those bowl games are not playoff games.
Well, the thing that my mind goes to as I hear you talking about all of this, Mark, is that, in 1969, you had President Richard Nixon basically awarding the national championship to Texas after beating Arkansas in the 1-2 Classic in early December. So, Texas then did play Notre Dame in the 1970 Cotton Bowl, but if you've already been proclaimed national champion by the president of the United States and also by the Associated Press or various other media groups, we don't have a frame of reference for that today. Now we could say that, in the 2006 Rose Bowl, that ESPN was proclaiming USC as the greatest team ever before the game. But no one was saying USC's already the national champion. No, they played that game for the national championship. But in the 60s, college football's culture at the time was that, if you were number one at the end of the regular season, well, that was it. And what President Nixon did in 1969, so how do you play that 1970 Cotton Bowl game as a Texas Longhorn? It's just a totally different frame of reference. And so how we evaluate that kind of situation today, retrospectively, it's such a difficult dynamic to really wrestle with and understand.
And just to quickly answer the question or the comment made by Mike 3883 that says, what if you did a community poll before the video asking if we think a team should have more, less, or have the right number of national championships? I would very much respect certain people's opinion, but I'm guessing that most people would not have a reasonable opinion on USC's 1931 claim to a national championship. So I don't know how much that poll would mean.